Hello, everyone. Today's guest gave me the blooper that I'm going to share with you. He told me about an American senior executive who went to China and presented his business card. And translating company names into Chinese requires a lot of special attention and extra steps, which the executive's translation agency obviously did not do. And instead of correctly translating the company name Standard & Poor's, the Chinese name became Average and Bankrupt. It's one of the funniest mistranslations I have ever heard, and a perfect illustration of why using AI alone or non-professional linguists can get you into trouble, and how professional agencies such as ours will ensure to get it right and to make you shine. So today's guest is Vinod Jain. Vinod is an expert in global and digital strategy, a former business professor, and an author of books on global strategy and digital strategy. His latest book, Global Meets Digital, Global Strategy for Digital Businesses and Digital Strategy for Global Businesses, was published in June 2023 by Routledge in London and New York. Vinod has lived and worked in 6 countries, including India and the US, 30 years each, Britain, Bahrain, China, and Poland. He has taught at the University of Maryland and at the Rutgers Business School in New Jersey. Previously, Vinod worked for many years with the foreign subsidiaries of British and US multinationals, including as VP at Macmillan Publishers, the manager of coordination at Mullins, and as a market research executive at Coca-Cola. While not a techie, Vinod is fascinated by and has flirted with digital business and digital strategy almost since the dot-com days, and he has written many articles and opinion pieces for magazines worldwide. Vinod is a member of the Forbes Business Council, TIE, one of the world's largest associations of CEOs and entrepreneurs, and has taken 2 business delegations to India. Vinod has a PhD in strategy and international business from the University of Maryland. Welcome, Vinod. Delighted that you're with us today.
Thank you, Philip. Very nice of you to have me.
Thank you. So your expertise is both in global strategy and digital marketing and the intersection of the two. And I think it would be best if we start by perhaps discussing how companies have developed a global strategy, but don't necessarily rely on digital marketing as the only way to do it. So what strategy do these companies tend to use?
Well, this is how companies have always did business abroad before digital marketing came along. They would use the local marketing channels. But let me first try and explore what I mean by digital strategy.
Yes.
And digital marketing. To me, digital strategy, the whole works, from R&D to manufacturing, to marketing, to distribution, and so on. Whereas digital marketing is a lot more than promoting the product through LinkedIn or AdWords and so on. The typical definition of marketing used to be the 4 P's of marketing: product, price, promotion, and place. To me, marketing is like the 5 fingers of a hand, which includes the product, price, promotion, place, and customer experience, the most crucial aspect of a company's marketing strategy. The idea of this is that these are the elements within a company's control, not like weather or government policy, which are not within a company's control. And you would think of, one would think of customer experience as something a customer experiences outside a company's control. But truly, it is within a country's control how a customer would experience the product through their own strategies and through their own approach. So that's how I would look at marketing as a broader perspective rather than just a promotion. Now, to give you a couple of examples, it depends on the product that you're selling. for most products, for most consumer products, when you take them abroad, it will be based on what the practice is there. For instance, let's take Danone products, which is a yogurt company from France. So their Activia product, Activia probiotic yogurt, is sold in something like 70 countries. And being a fresh dairy product, it is manufactured there wherever it is sold. And it is flavored differently for different countries. In Mexico, it has a cactus flavor. In Japan, it has a vegetable flavor. In Russia, it has a kefir flavor.
I'm sorry,
So
what flavor?
Kefir, K-E-F-I-R,
Kefir.
kefir.
Yes.
And it depends on where they are sold. They customize the product. That's part of their marketing mix. They customize the product depending on the customs, the taste, the nutritional needs of where it is being sold. And besides, it's a dairy product, so it cannot be manufactured in one country and shipped to another country. Take another example of Nestlé, which I've also discussed in my book. Nestlé is the world's largest food products company. And one would think of many Nestlé products as being pretty standardized the world over. I mean, Evian water, of course, is very standardized. It comes only from one source in France. And what would think of Nescafe? It's a very standardized product. But as I understand, it even varies between countries. In France, they tend to drink stronger coffee than in Britain. So they tend to standardize or customize even their presumably standardized products. So that is marketing, how you design the product, how you market it. Now, in terms of non-digital marketing, it's sold through, food products are sold through generally stores. They may still be advertised using AdWords or LinkedIn or social media and so on. Okay.
Very interesting. You mentioned Nestle, and there's a classic, it's more than a blooper, it's a classic huge mistake that Nestle made. And this was decades ago. I assume they've corrected it. But they introduced their baby food, of course, in Africa. I think it was in Ethiopia. And of course, we all know Nestle as having the pretty baby on the label, the white baby on the label. And they did not realize, and this is a classic mistake in marketing, not doing proper research, that in some African countries where people are not terribly literate, people look at the label to assume that that's what's inside the container. So of course the Ethiopians, or whoever it was, assumed that the jar of baby food contained puree of white baby, which was not exactly the image that Nestle wanted to give, and perhaps, and presumably, they have fixed that somehow.
Yeah.
So that's those examples that you gave are very interesting of how products are still tweaked, are still changed, even though they're standardized according to flavor, according to the tastes of the local market. It's very interesting. You also have mentioned, I believe in your book and in previous conversations, that digital marketing is not just LinkedIn and AdWords, as you were saying in the beginning, but your definition is more expansive to include platforms and ecosystems. Could you elaborate what that means?
Yes, of course. Well, as I said earlier, marketing involves all the decision elements that are within a company's control as to what product they are doing, whether it's standardized or customized or whatever, the pricing policies, the promotional policies, place, and customer experience. Now, promotion can be through digital media such as LinkedIn and AdWords. But how is it sold? Where is it sold? It can be sold through stores, but increasingly companies are using platforms such as Amazon.com to sell their products. So today, Amazon has literally millions of products. I'm actually a big customer, so I know them very well. And I understand some 60% of the products sold on Amazon are sold by small and medium-sized companies, not by major companies like Procter and Gamble. Those small and medium-sized companies can have their own other ways of selling, but they are increasingly selling through Amazon. Similarly, there are many other platforms where one can sell their products through. And in fact, most retail stores, big retail stores like Walmart and Target, have their own digital marketing business, which is increasing in volume. Of course, let me see what else I have. I mean, and also it depends on the kind of product. Is it a digital product? Obviously, it is sold through digital media, online, by the company. I'm thinking of Microsoft 365, a suite of software products like Word and PowerPoint and Excel. You can buy it in a store like Best Buy for something like $400. You can buy it online from Amazon, from Microsoft.com. But much of the 365 is sold through online media. In fact, the trend now is a lot of such software products are being sold by subscriptions. I mean, I have a subscription to 365, a family subscription. So instead of paying $400 in the market, I pay them $99 a year for a family subscription for up to 6 laptops or 6 computers. So it depends on the product that you're trying to sell. For digital products, it is increasingly subscription-based. Even a product like ebooks, reading ebooks, Kindle by Amazon, you can buy the physical product and listen to books. But now there's an app for that. I don't even have to buy the physical. I can, through my phone or through my computer, listen to any book I want. So really depends on the product.
Do you see that there will always be a market for the stores themselves, the retail stores, or do you think everything will increasingly go to digital and we won't need stores anymore?
One of the things I point out in my book are the number of stores, the major chains that have gone out of business during the pandemic. Partly because of the pandemic, but partly because of the Amazon effect. Amazon effect, I mean, buying online through platforms like Amazon. And I think there will always be a market for physical stores. Now I'm thinking of India, my own village in India. They obviously, stores will always exist there.
Right.
I think you mentioned sometime about lack of electricity or unstable electricity, internet connections. So which is not always, so people have to revert to physical stores.
Well, that's especially true in developing countries.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, personally, I just don't like buying online. I avoid buying online as much as I can because I like is to buy to see a product, touch a product, you know, understand the colors, the sizing, and so forth, especially clothing and shoes, so forth. And I'm going to contradict myself and say that I bought shoes online, sight unseen, and it's worked fine. But you know, so I think there's definitely a need for both, but obviously a lot of younger people feel that they will only buy online, they will only buy through Amazon or something because of the convenience. What about ecosystems? What do you mean by that?
Now, ecosystem goes beyond a platform. Now, when I'm trying to buy something, it's not just that thing, a whole host of other. When a company wants to buy something, they are looking to satisfy a need, which may include many other things, including services. So an ecosystem is a group of companies, oftentimes from different industries, that satisfy somebody's need. So, I mean, SAS, the company, they have a huge ecosystem for industrial goods. So when you need to buy 1,000 tons of steel of some kind, they have an ecosystem for that. So you're not only promoting the products of different steel companies, you can buy through that, but also there's a question of payments, delivery, selection, all kinds of issues. So an ecosystem is beyond a platform.
Do these ecosystems include servicing, product servicing as well?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, because that's pretty critical. What about companies that are solely using digital marketing to expand abroad? Can you give us some examples of those and how that has worked?
No, obviously, the digital companies would almost exclusively use digital marketing to expand abroad. I gave the example of Microsoft 365. It's only digital that they sell the product through digital marketing. Even physical products companies could possibly be using digital marketing. I mean, the product itself is digital, is physical. I mean, they might use Amazon.com in a different country. That is digital marketing.
Are there other companies that sell? Let me back up. There are companies that sell only by digital, but those obviously are digital products only. So I'm thinking, for example, of books. Those are obviously physical, and they can be sold in bookstores, but increasingly they are also sold just online.
Right.
But what strategies do these digital companies use? Do they find mailing lists, for example, or target lists? How do they find their potential customers?
I think all of the above. Not just through AdWords, through LinkedIn, through social media, by speaking on podcasts like I'm doing, writing articles, reaching out to journalists to write a free story about them. They use all kinds of media.
Yeah, and when I said mailing lists, I meant emailing lists.
Email, of course, yeah.
Okay, well, that's very interesting.
And I use all of those for my own book. I have a fairly large, well, not large, 500 is not a large. These are people I know. I send them regular emails. I have a blog. I am writing articles and trying to speak on podcasts like yours. So that's how I'm doing.
Are there any methods that seem to be more successful than others, or does it totally depend on the product or service that you're selling?
Yeah, I think that's right. It depends on the product or service you're selling. I mean, products like software and all obviously would go through social media, sell well through social media and other forms of online advertising.
And when a product is solely digital, I assume that requires a lot of translation and localization to target the appropriate country or culture. And if it is localized, then it may also have to be acculturated, culturally adapted, as you were giving the example of the yogurt earlier. Can you give some examples of companies that have translated their products and perhaps adapted them in translation or culturally changed them in some way?
I think practically most companies, most smart companies like to do that. I think we also talked about developing countries.
Mm.
And to what extent you would customize a product to suit the needs and wants and the customs and regulations of a country. It depends really on the product, in my view.
Okay. When selling products abroad, and this is really on the non-digital level, as you mentioned the shops in India, for example. Yeah. Very often when companies go abroad, they have to repackage their product, obviously to meet the local needs, as you've given some examples. Yeah. But some of that is actually in the packaging itself, where I'll call it the Costco model. In the United States, you can go infrequently and buy small quantities of infrequent purchases of large quantities, right? Toilet paper, for example. Excuse me, toilet paper, detergent, for example. Right. Whereas in the developing world, where people don't have as much money, or they may be paid weekly or month, most people are paid monthly or biweekly, and in cash. Well, no, that's changing now, but it used to be in cash. Then they would want to do frequent shopping and very small quantities. Can you give some examples of how companies have to repackage their products for the developing world to meet those needs?
I'm glad you asked, because I have an example to show you, show and tell. You know, in India, almost 70% of the people live in villages. And many of them, not just weekly or monthly, get the daily wages. Mm. They just can't afford to buy a whole bottle of shampoo, but they will buy a little sachet. Can you see this?
Yes.
It used to cost about a rupee or so. Rupee would be a few cents. So anytime they need to have a shampoo, they would buy a sachet. I brought a few. Such products. Tide. In fact, a lot of consumer goods in India are available in small sachets for the rural markets. And even in cities, I've seen, in fact, I bought them from New Delhi from a shop. Mm. So that's companies have to try to do anything and everything to try and sell their products. And packaging is very important, depending on the buying power of the market.
And I know candy is another example of where we would have a whole box of candy, for example. In India or developing countries, you would have just one or two candies in a packet. And the 70% of the rural population, 70% of the population that is rural, I assume they are still paid in cash?
A lot of them are paid in cash. And in India, even cash is becoming a little digital.
Right, yes.
I mean, I have friends in India, my old classmates, who don't use cash, who don't carry even a wallet with them anymore, you know, with cash.
Yes. And what do they use instead?
Those are credit cards or some digital currency.
Okay. The most famous digital currency is M-Pesa from Kenya. It's developed there. Can you tell our audience, for those who don't know, how digital currency works?
Okay, that's a little difficult question. In fact, just last week I gave a talk on a history of money,
Ah,
ending with digital currencies. And because I didn't know much about digital currencies, I used Chat GPT to prepare a few slides. Would you believe that? So these are digital currencies. These are not physical. They are only digital, and they have value. It's just that the digital currencies are highly variable in terms of their pricing and so on. But a new trend is the central bank issued digital currencies, CBDCs, which are issued by the central bank of a country. And I think that's what you were referring to in Kenya. They're issued by the central bank there. They are much more stable and much more probably reliable.
okay, no, very interesting. And I know in India I can't remember the name. It's got a double A, but the government now has set up basic bank accounts for people, for most Indians all over the country, including the rural population, and um, any financial benefits they may get, whether it's for welfare, healthcare, whatever, is transmitted electronically by the government into their electronic bank accounts.
That's true.
And what is that called?
It's called Aadhaar.
Aadhaar. Yes.
Aadhaar. And this is a great experiment which India did. I think more than 1 billion people now have an Aadhaar card, like a social security card here,
Right.
which is an incredible achievement of the government there. And so everybody has to have an Aadhaar card to have a bank account, to do any transaction, basically. I mean, recently I sent a gift to some relatives in India through Amazon.in, the Indian subsidiary. So they wanted the Aadhaar number of the recipients. Without that, they would not give it to them.
That's wonderful.
It's a great, I think, achievement.
Yes, that's an extraordinary achievement that the current government actually has implemented and rolled out and been extremely successful at. And one of the purposes, of course, is to reduce corruption, to reduce the ability of, I don't know, the bankers, but local officials, perhaps,
Absolutely. Yeah.
to transfer money to, say, the states, the equivalent of the states, the counties, the villages, and along the way, the money diminishes and no longer gets to the proper recipient.
Right. It also brought a lot of people who had no bank accounts into the banking system.
Exactly. And so now that they are banked, basically, I assume they can get credit and potentially mortgages and financial products. Is that correct?
Yes. And there's also, I think, a growing trend of microfinance.
Microfinance, yes.
Somebody could just get a loan of $100 to start a business. That sort of.
And microfinance, for our listeners, was another incredible achievement created by, I believe it was created by Muhammad Yunus, YUNS, who was in Pakistan. And he won the Nobel Prize for that, if I'm not mistaken. And as you're saying, you can lend a villager, say, $100, or the equivalent of $100, and with that, a person can buy a few sheep or ducks or chickens or something physical, and then sell the produce from that. And that's remarkable. And obviously, from chickens come eggs, and from ducks come other ducks, and so forth. And from sheep come wool and lamb meat and so forth. So these microfinancial loans obviously empower people in developing countries to become entrepreneurs, where they could have either starved or just become wage laborers before. So that's created an enormous boon all around the world. for this.
Yeah, let me provide a little background also. You're absolutely right, Muhammad Yunus, uh, from Bangladesh, which was part of
Oh,
Pakistan at
Bangladesh.
one
So
time.
sorry, you're right.
Uh,
Right,
yeah, it was part
Bangladesh.
of Pakistan when he was born.
Right.
So when he returned to Bangladesh, he found several people owed money to the money lenders in the villages, which can never be repaid because the interest rates are so high. Somebody owed just something like equivalent of $35, and he was indebted for life.
Mm.
So what he did, he just paid off those loans for his village people. And that's how, as you suggested, microfinance began. Now it's a fairly big opportunity or a fairly big thing in a lot of countries.
Yeah, and I have read that the jury is still out whether it's successful. There have been problems with it. I don't quite know what those problems are. But I do know that in many ways it works beautifully, and in some ways
Yeah.
it's been problematic.
I think initially the repayment used to be pretty good. Um, there have been problems on the repayment part.
The repayment side.
Still reasonably successful.
Although when microfinance was started, when Dr. Yunus started microfinance in Bangladesh, the idea was that the village would all come together to support the lenders or support the loan recipient and help guarantee that often 80% were women,
Yeah.
would pay it back. So the village would come together to really take on the loan collectively, individually,
Right.
but also collectively. That was also a very wonderful and powerful incentive, I think, for a lot of people.
Right. Yeah.
Is there anything else you'd like to add before we close?
I just want to make one quick point.
Yes.
I look at products as three kinds of products: digital products, like we mentioned, like software, for instance, or ebooks, and physical products, like we all buy and sell. But then there is also products which are both digital and physical and connected to the internet. They have very different characteristics. I'm thinking of an Apple Watch. They're called Internet of Things. Apple Watch is an IoT device. So is the Nest thermometer. So is a drone. A lot of these products are very different, and they are increasing. Today, there are, I think, like 25 billion Internet of Things devices. And this is something I talk extensively about. What are the characteristics of the three kinds of products? And that has a big impact on how they're bought and sold.
That's fascinating. And are the sales channels different? Because Apple Watch, for example, can be sold through a shop, but can also be sold online.
Right.
So and a drone, I never bought a drone. I've never shopped for one, so I don't know. But obviously, it depends if it's a toy versus if it's for military use. But still, if it's for people as opposed for the military, for common people, then I presume it's sold through the same channels, which is both retail as well as online.
Right.
But are there differences also in then how these products are sold?
Well, not just selling. I mean, I would say a key characteristic of digital products is that they have network effects.
I'm sorry, they have what, please?
Network effects.
Okay.
The more the number of users, the greater the exponentially the value that they derive. And the traditional example used to be a fax machine. If only you and I have a fax machine, it's of no use. But if as more and more people get fax machines, the value of the fax machine to you and to me multiplies exponentially. So digital products have that characteristic. Now, IoT, Internet of Things devices also have that characteristic. Physical goods do not have that characteristic. Like a platform, which has a two-sided platform, buyers and sellers. If I start a platform of my own, it most likely would not succeed. A platform needs a large number of buyers and a large number of sellers to become successful. The more buyers come, the more sellers would come. The more sellers come, the more buyers would come. That's the network effect. So that's a key characteristic of products these days, and increasingly so.
That's very interesting and obviously very insightful. You're right. And for people who don't know, there still are people who don't know, a fax machine is the fax, FAX, is the abbreviation of facsimile. And right. Actually, I've got one built in now to my printer.
Right.
Printer, copier, fax machine, all in one, but they used to be separate. And basically, you can put a paper in. It's the equivalent of scanning a paper in through one's fax machine at one's home or office, and it comes out as a paper in the recipient's home or office.
I have an interesting. Sorry to.
Yes, please.
It came to me a very interesting example of how the fax business started. FedEx in the 70s got the great idea, hey, why don't we install a fax machine in all our offices? So he wanted to send a fax from Washington, D.C. to New York. You take the fax to the local FedEx office, they fax it to New York, and they deliver it by vehicle to the recipient. It was called the 4-hour fax. But because of network effects, the business failed in a few months. As more and more people bought fax machines, it was of no use. The business, even FedEx, didn't survive that particular business.
That's amazing. Well, another quick story. When our business started as a language translation agency, the reason it started was that I have a master's degree in international business, and I've studied, I think, 8 languages.
Wow.
So, and some 33 years ago, perhaps, we were approached. I had a consultancy at the time, and we were approached one day by a group of translators, and they were in a totally separate country, which most people would never guess. And they asked, could we promote their ability to do translations to or from English or any other language combination to American clients, and we would find the clients and handle the accounting and the customer service and so forth, but they would do the actual work. And at the time, this was far before the internet, far before far before digital communication of any kind. These transmissions were all done by fax. So we would send the English to this group of translators during our daytime. It would be their night, giving you a hint. They would translate it during their daytime, which would be our night, fax it back to us, and in our morning we would have it and could deliver it to the client by fax. And can you guess where these people were? Obviously, they were not in the US time zone.
Yeah, no, I mean, there'll be somewhere in the East. I mean, possibly India or China or somewhere there.
Well, this was before the development of India or China, actually.
Okay.
So, but they were in New Zealand, of all places.
New Zealand, wow.
A country that has 3 million English-speaking white people and 60 million sheep. And very remote, but very remote at the time, not so much now.
Very interesting.
But again, it was all done by fax, and that's how our business grew and developed and thrived, and went from the non-digital age straight through to the digital age and beyond.
That's right. Yeah, very interesting.
So thank you so much, Vinod. This has been a fascinating conversation, and going through a lot of technological history also, which I don't think we expected to do.
Thank you, Philip. It's been wonderful speaking to you.
Pleasure. And I hope you will all join us next week for another edition of Global Gurus and their
I will.
service of international business.
Great. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Take care.